The African savanna stretched endlessly beneath a sky bruised with the purples and golds of dusk, its grasses whispering secrets to the wind. In the heart of this vast, untamed wilderness, where the air thrummed with the pulse of life, a drama was unfolding that would ripple through the animal kingdom like a stone cast into still water. Kibo, a young silverback gorilla, moved with deliberate grace through the tangled edge of a forest that bordered the open plains. His massive frame, cloaked in midnight fur, glistened with the sweat of a long day's foraging. At barely 10 years old, Kibo was not yet the leader of his troop, but his strength and quiet intelligence had already earned him respect. His dark eyes, deep as ancient wells, scanned the horizon, alert to the dangers that lurked where forest met savanna. The troop, his mother, sisters, and the grizzled patriarch, Mbogo, rested in a clearing behind him, their soft grunts and rustling leaves a comforting hum in the fading light. It was then that Kibo heard it, a high, piercing cry, sharp as a shard of glass. It came from the savanna, where the tall grasses swayed like an ocean under the wind. His ears twitched, and his broad chest tightened. The cry was not one of his kind, but it carried a note of terror that transcended species. Kibo hesitated, his instincts warring between the safety of his troop and the pull of that desperate sound. Another cry, weaker now, sliced through the air, and Kibo's decision was made. He lumbered forward, his knuckles brushing the earth as he moved toward the source. The scene that greeted him was one of primal horror. In a shallow dip of the savanna, where the grass gave way to patches of bare earth, a lion cub, no more than a few months old, thrashed in the coils of a giant python. The serpent, its body as thick as a man's thigh and longer than 2 gorillas laid end to end, gleamed with iridescent scales that caught the dying light. Its coils tightened with mechanical precision, the cub's golden fur matted with sweat and fear. The cub's eyes, wide and amber, locked onto Kibo's, pleading for a salvation it could not comprehend. Kibo's heart thundered. He had seen pythons before, their stealth and strength a constant threat in the forest shadows. But this one was a monster, a relic of some ancient, untamed world. The cub's mother was nowhere in sight, and the savanna was eerily still, as if the land itself held its breath. Kibo's mind raced. To intervene was to risk his life. Pythons were not predators to be trifled with, and his troop depended on his strength. But the cub's weakening cries stirred something deep within him, a spark of empathy that burned brighter than fear. With a low, rumbling grunt, Kibo charged. The python's head whipped toward him, its eyes cold and unblinking, a hiss like steam escaping a fissure. Kibo's massive fist swung down, striking the serpent's body just behind its head. The impact sent a tremor through the coils, loosening them for a fleeting moment. The cub gasped, its tiny chest heaving, but the python was far from defeated. It reared back, jaws gaping to reveal fangs like curved daggers, and struck at Kibo with terrifying speed. Kibo dodged, his agility belying his size, and seized the snake's body in both hands. Muscles rippling beneath his fur, he yanked the python upward, forcing its coils to slacken further. The cub wriggled free, collapsing in a heap of trembling fur, its breath ragged. But the python was not done. It twisted in Kibo's grip, its tail lashing like a whip, wrapping around his leg with crushing force. Pain seared through Kibo's thigh, but he roared, a deep, earth-shaking bellow that echoed across the savanna, and slammed the snake against the ground. The struggle was brutal, a clash of raw power and primal will. Kibo's strength was immense, but the python's relentless coils seemed to multiply, squeezing his chest, threatening to crush the breath from his lungs. His vision blurred, the world narrowing to the serpent's hissing maw and the cub's faint whimpers. With a final, Desperate surge, Kibbo sank his teeth into the python's neck, just below its head. The snake thrashed, its body convulsing, and then slowly its grip loosened. Kibbo tore free, hurling the python's limp form into the grass, where it lay still, its menace extinguished. Panting, blood trickling from a gash on his arm, Kibbo turned to the cub. It was alive, though barely, its tiny body curled into a ball. He scooped it up gently, its warmth fragile against his calloused palms. The cub's eyes fluttered, meeting his once more, and in that moment, a bond formed. A silent pact between two souls who had faced death together. But the savannah was never a place for rest. As Kibbo cradled the cub, a low growl rumbled from the grass. His head snapped up, and there, emerging from the shadows of dusk, were the eyes of a lion pride. 5 lionesses, their muscles taut and eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and fear, stalked forward. At their center stood a massive male, his mane a dark corona, his gaze fixed on Kibbo with an intensity that promised violence. The cub belonged to them, and Kibbo, a gorilla in their domain, was an intruder. Kibbo's heart sank. He had saved the cub, but at what cost? The lionesses fanned out, their growls rising into a chorus that sent a shiver through the air. The male stepped forward, his roar shaking the earth, a challenge that demanded submission. Kibbo clutched the cub closer, his mind racing for a way to escape this new threat. He was strong, but against a pride he was outnumbered, outmatched. The savannah, once a place of beauty, now felt like a trap closing around him. Yet something strange happened. One of the lionesses, her coat scarred and her eyes softer than the others, broke from the line. She approached Kibbo, her head low, her movements deliberate. The pride stilled, watching her. She stopped a few paces away, her gaze shifting from Kibbo to the cub in his arms. Then, in a gesture that defied the laws of the wild, she lowered her head further, almost in a bow, and let out a soft, plaintive sound. A sound not of threat, but of gratitude. The pride's tension broke like a wave. The other lionesses relaxed, their growls fading. The male, though still wary, ceased his advance. Kibbo's breath caught. He had expected death, not this. Slowly, he set the cub down, and it stumbled toward the scarred lioness, who nuzzled it with a tenderness that belied her ferocity. The pride closed ranks around the cub, their eyes still on Kibbo, but the threat was gone. They turned, melting into the grass, leaving Kibbo alone under the vast, starlit sky. He stood there, bloodied and weary, as the weight of what had happened settled over him. He had saved a life, defied the natural order, and somehow, impossibly, earned the respect of a lion pride. But as he turned back toward the forest, a new sound reached his ears, a distant, guttural snarl, unlike any lion's. It came from the direction of his troop, and with it, the faint, panicked cries of his family. Kibbo's blood ran cold. The savannah was not done with him yet. The savannah's heartbeat pulsed through Kibbo's veins as he sprinted toward the forest, the distant cries of his troop clawing at his resolve. The stars above burned cold and indifferent, casting jagged shadows across the grasslands that seemed to twist and writhe like living things. The air was thick with the scent of dust and danger, and Kibbo's massive frame, though battered from his battle with the python, moved with a purpose forged in fire. The cub was safe, but his family, his mother, his sisters, the old patriarch Mbogo, was in peril, and every second he lingered was a second too long. The snarls grew louder as he neared the forest's edge, a cacophony of guttural menace that sent birds scattering from the treetops. Kibbo's chest heaved, his wounds stinging with each stride, but fear for his troop drowned out the pain. He burst through a curtain of vines into the clearing where his family had been resting, and the sight before him stopped him cold. A pack of hyenas, their eyes glinting like embers in the moonlight, circled the troop. There were at least a dozen, their spotted hides sleek and taut with hunger, their laughter. A chilling, high-pitched cackle, slicing through the night. Mbogo stood at the center, his silver mane bristling, his fists pounding the earth in a display of defiance. But the old gorilla was weary, his movements slower than Kibo remembered, and the hyenas sensed it. Kibo's mother, Aisha, clutched his youngest sister, Zara, while the other females huddled behind Mbogo, their eyes wide with terror. The hyenas were bold, darting in to nip at Mbogo's flanks, testing his strength. One lunged too close, and Mbogo's arm swung like a club, sending the beast tumbling with a yelp. But the pack was relentless, their numbers a tide that threatened to overwhelm. Kibo's heart roared with fury and fear. He had faced a python and walked away, but hyenas were a different kind of enemy, cunning, coordinated, and merciless. They would not stop until they had their prey. Kibo charged into the fray, his roar splitting the night like thunder. The hyenas froze, their eyes locking onto this new threat. Kibo's size was a force of its own, his presence a mountain in the clearing, but the hyenas were not easily cowed. Their leader, a massive female with a scarred muzzle and eyes that burned with malice, stepped forward, her cackle rising in challenge. Kibo met her gaze, his fists clenched, every muscle coiled for battle. The fight was chaos. Kibo swung with devastating force, his fists smashing into hyena skulls, sending them sprawling. But the pack was swift, their jaws snapping at his legs, his arms, his back. Pain flared as teeth sank into his shoulder, hot blood matting his fur. Mbogo fought beside him, their combined strength a bulwark against the tide. But the hyenas were too many. Aisha screamed as a hyena lunged for Zara, and Kibo dove, tackling the beast midair, crushing it to the ground with a sickening crunch. For a moment it seemed they might hold. But then, a new sound cut through the chaos, a deep, resonant roar that shook the very earth. Kibo's head snapped toward the sound, his breath catching. From the darkness beyond the clearing, the lion pride emerged, their silhouettes ghostly in the moonlight. The scarred lioness led them, her eyes fixed on Kibo with an intensity that carried the weight of their earlier encounter. Behind her, the massive male and the other lionesses fanned out, their growls a low, ominous hum. The hyenas faltered, their cackles turning to whines. Lions were their ancient rivals, and this pride was no ordinary foe. Kibo stood frozen, unsure if the lions had come to claim the gorillas as their next target. But the scarred lioness did something extraordinary. She stepped forward, positioning herself between Kibo and the hyena leader, her teeth bared in a snarl that promised death. The pride followed her lead, forming a semicircle around the gorillas, their eyes locked on the hyenas. What happened next was a blur of ferocity. The lions attacked with surgical precision, their claws and teeth tearing through the hyena pack. The scarred lioness was a whirlwind, her jaws snapping the hyena leader's neck with a single, brutal bite. The male lion roared, his presence scattering the smaller hyenas, who fled into the night, their laughter replaced by panicked yelps. Within moments, the clearing was silent, save for the heavy breathing of the gorillas and the soft growls of the lions. Kibo stared, his mind reeling. The pride had not come to hunt, they had come to protect. The scarred lioness approached him, her gaze steady, and in it, Kibo saw something he had never expected. Respect, perhaps even kinship. She nudged the cub, now safe with its mother, toward Kibo, as if to acknowledge the debt they owed. Then, with a final glance, the pride melted back into the darkness, leaving the gorillas to their forest. Mbogo placed a heavy hand on Kibo's shoulder, his eyes gleaming with pride. Aisha gathered her children close, her touch a balm to Kibo's wounds. The troop was safe, but the night had changed them. Kibo looked out at the savannah, where the stars seemed brighter now, and felt the weight of a new truth. The wild was not just a place of survival. It was a place where bonds could form across the divide of species, where courage could rewrite the rules of nature. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of fire, Kibo stood watch over his troop, his heart full of a strange, fierce hope. The savannah had tested him, and he had emerged not just a protector, but a bridge between worlds. And though the wild would always hold its dangers, Kibo knew he would face them with the strength of those who stood beside him, gorilla, lion, and all.